Hey guys, it's Sam, and these are some series I will not be finishing. I did a similar video to this years ago, so I'll link that down below. There's a ton of other series mentioned in there, some very popular ones. One I'm going to repeat just because I get questions about it still. But otherwise, these are all new since that video was made, which was like 2017 or 19 or something. Anyway, it's down below if you want to get even more series that I won't finish. But first off, starting out strong is the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros, the first book being Fourth Wing. There's a lot of popular series on this list. This is one that I kind of didn't even plan on starting. I wasn't really sure that it was going to be for me, but everyone kept talking about there's a series and it's about dragons and it's so cool and da-da-da-da-da. And so I read it, and it was very not good. And there was nothing that I wanted to continue. It was fine to read. I was able to like get through it. It wasn't a DNF for me or anything. Wasn't probably even the worst book that I've read, but for the sheer amount of hype that the series gets, very not good. I believe I have a review for the first book if you're interested, so I'll link that on the screen. But yeah, there's going to be more books in this series. I think, what, 4 or 6? I don't know, something. There's 2 out already as of the filming of this video. I will not be continuing with this. I didn't like the main character. I didn't like how completely overpowered she was. I didn't like that none of the academic setting, competition setting made a lot of sense, as far as it being a military academy in which they just are letting a lot of people die. Like, you have a small force of fighters as it is. It's actually very military strategy stupid to do that. It's a very nonsensical book and I don't like it. Also, you guys may remember the saga from last year, but The Vampire Academy by Rochelle Mead. This is an older series by now. It's a YA series about vampires if you're not familiar. Last year I attempted to read it because a lot of people are very nostalgic for it, and I read the first book, didn't like it. It's a YA series. It's very, very dated, and it's very young feeling. A lot of people were like, you have to continue, and it gets good. I read the second book. It did not get any better. And then people said, you have to continue. I said, no, I am not doing that. So these books are they're very YA. They're very teenage of a certain era even. It feels very early aughts. That's when they were written. And it's just not good because there's all this like serious vampire stuff happening, but for the most part like nothing happens for all of the book. It's just like weird high school drama, and then stuff will happen at the very, very end, and somehow Rose, who's incredibly incompetent through most of the book, figures things out. It doesn't make sense. Also, I find the relationship that is in there is very icky. It's an age and agency gap romance, and it just doesn't work for me with actual teenagers. So yeah, a lot of people love it. I'm not saying you don't have to love it, but please, for the love of God, can we all consider that, like, a lot of the reason that people love this series is because they have nostalgia goggles on for it. We can admit that. It's not good. It was good for you at a time. I feel like we've gotten to that place with Twilight for a lot of people, and they just, like, won't do it with this in some places, and I'm like, why not? Just say it was good at the time. For you, and maybe it wasn't even good at the time, but you just enjoyed it, and that's fine. I will not be continuing with this series or the spinoff. Next is a Southern Reach series by Jeff Vandermeer. This is a trilogy of sort of companion-y novels, like they're all taking place around the same thing, which is, the first book is Annihilation. Annihilation was a movie they eventually made out of this book. Well, it was inspired by this book, but it was its own thing. This is, like, there's some kind of weird anomaly that, is it science, is it nature, is it aliens, what is it? That pops up, and so in the first book, this like team is sent in following one of the main characters that we follow, and there's just like weird stuff happening in there with like nature and people kind of going crazy, and you're not sure what is happening basically. And it was like kind of a slow build, and it just wasn't that gripping for me. I need to watch the movie because from what I've seen of the trailer of the movie, that is what I want. It's very like nature taking people over kind of thing. There's like an alien component. That wasn't explored a ton in the book. And then by the second book, things are happening, like the way that the second book is being told. I started the second book. It wasn't working for me. I can't remember the exact specifics now because it was a few years ago, but I just wasn't really interested, and so I gave up on that. Even though Born by Jeff Vandermeer is one of my favorite books of all time, this just did not work for me. So even though this is kind of a classic in this sort of new weird genre, I don't think I'll return to it. Another fan favorite that I mentioned in my first video, but I want to revisit because I get a lot of questions about it, is the Throne of Glass series. This is one I could potentially still read at some point, but the odds get lower and lower every year. I read the first 3 books as they were coming out, kind of. Or like I think Heir of Fire had like just come out. So I read those 3 like kind of back to back and enjoyed them a lot, and then, but I was I was a Kale girl. I liked that relationship, and it felt so ham-fisted to like shatter that relationship, and there was just like a lot of things about what was happening in that fandom at the time. And I find the Sarah J. Maas fandom then and now to be pretty trash and not a fun experience, and like if you ever talk crap about these books, they like chase you down. It's very cult-like, and I don't dig it. So I just started losing interest over time, and now it's gotten so long that I think I haven't read these books since like maybe, I don't know, 2017 or something, maybe earlier. I think it was like 2017, 2018 at the very, very latest. So it's been a long time, and I'm just not interested in going back and revisiting them and rereading the first three. I mean, maybe if I started them, I would just start from the fourth one and kind of treat it like its own thing. I remember some bare bones, but I'm just not that interested enough, and I don't really like Sarah J. Maas's writing enough to try to go into this when there's so many other like high fantasy series that I want to read. This just isn't the one that really speaks to me. I know enough about it. Like, I know a lot of major plot points at this point that if someone wanted to talk to me about it, I could probably like have a conversation about it. So yeah, I do not believe I'll ever return to this series. Next is the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. This one actually saddens me. I read at least the first two books in this series, couldn't tell you a thing about them. These did not hold my attention. I maybe should I try to read them on physical copy? I don't know. I was reading the audiobooks. It couldn't get, like, they just washed over me. I could not get attached. I get the idea of liking Murderbot as a character, kind of, but then all the side characters just feel like nothing. There's just nothing, yeah, like, very enticing. Even, the second book had the thing with the, like, sentient ship, right? I don't know. There's things in there that I should like. Like, on paper, the Murderbot series is a series that I should love. And I just don't. Like, I just don't have a lot of feeling towards it. I don't hate it. It's not a series that I'm like, oh, they are so bad and I don't know why everyone likes them. Like, I kind of get why. I don't get why people like them as much as they do. I don't know. They did not grab me in the way that I thought that they would. So yeah, I've read the first two, and I was going to attempt to maybe go back and try, but I think I've given up on this. Then we have the Fever series by Karen Marie Moning. I feel very similar to this as I feel about the Vampire Academy in some ways. This series is an adult series, and it's like kind of classic urban fantasy based around fae and stuff. And I love an urban fantasy. I love a paranormal romance. Like, that's all what this is. But I think there's better ones. And maybe this was so great for its time, but now I'm just like, ooh, it is so dated. The relationship stuff in there is, again, so dated and problematic because this genre is already kind of a little behind anyway in its tropes and things. And if you take a very dated series, I think this was written in the 90s or maybe, again, early 2000s. If you take a series like that and have to go back and you don't have the nostalgia goggles for it from when you first read it, oof, because like I can do that with the Anita Blake series that I've talked about in depth on my channel over the years, which I read initially as a teenager. So I have some nostalgia goggles for it, and I'm able to go, some of this is nostalgia. Some of this, if you read it for the first time, would be really problematic for the current time period, but I can kind of roll with it. And this, I just didn't have those nostalgia goggles for, and I just think there's other urban fantasy series that I'm interested in that I'd rather read, newer ones that are coming out. I want to finish the Kate Daniels series. Like, there are things that I would be rather reading instead of this. So I think I read the first two or three, maybe the first two. And again, didn't grip me. Will not be continuing. And we have These Violent Delights series by Chloe Gong. This is, I think there's actually like a different series name for this, but this was a duology, and the first book was like very popular. I mean, the series is pretty popular. It's a YA series. It's kind of like Romeo and Juliet and this just like did not work for me. And the second book sounds like it's just going to be a rehashing of the first book in almost like the opposite direction. And I hate when duologies do that. I love a duology. Do not repeat the first book, basically. When you add elements that are just the first book, part two, because the roles changed a little bit, no. That's so lazy. So yeah, not interested in this. I think there was a lot of flaws in that first book that just did not grip me. I do not know why this book was so popular when it first came out. I feel like it's kind of fallen off in popularity now. But yeah, this is a series that I will not be continuing. Similarly, but for kind of different reasons, is the Serpent and Dove series by Shelby Marin, I think is her name. I read the first book and kind of liked it. Like, I was like, okay, it's a witch and a witch hunter kind of romance situation happening. They have like an arranged marriage. She knows he's a witch hunter. He doesn't know that she's a witch. And yeah, and it seemed kind of cool, but everyone has told me that like the series drops off so severely, that the world building is like kind of nonsensical in a lot of ways, that all this stuff, because I was like, oh, I'm also interested in learning more about the witches and stuff. And they're like, yeah, there's no payoff for that. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I can just treat this as a standalone, which is what I did. I think I gave it like a 3-star, maybe 3.5. Like, I kind of enjoyed it, but it's just a series that I do not need to continue and will not. Then we have The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, which I might have mentioned in my last video about this because this has been going on for some time. But basically, until he writes that next book, which I don't think that he will at this point. Like, I am more convinced that we're going to get a, like, George R. R. Martin Game of Thrones finale than I think we would get the final book in the Kingkiller Chronicles. So yeah, I really enjoyed the first book. I've forgotten a lot about it now, and I had every intention of reading on, and I think I own the second book. But I'm like, no, I will not read it until there's an announcement of him working on that book, and I don't think he is. There's been so many blind items about, like, talking about, like, famous fantasy author says he's never going to finish his book, and everyone's like, it's George R. R. Martin. I was like, no, it's Patrick Rothfuss. It is so obviously Patrick Rothfuss. So yeah, we'll not be continuing with that series. So yeah, that is it for the heavy hitters for big series that I will not be continuing with. Comment down below, let me know some series that you will not be finishing. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.